Hello everyone. Before we begin, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment saying where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories like this. Now let's begin. I was 22 when I took the night shift at a small funeral home just outside town. It wasn't the kind of job I ever imagined doing, but I needed money fast, and they were the only place hiring with no experience required. The building itself sat alone at the end of a quiet road, surrounded by old trees that blocked out most of the streetlights. During the day, it looked normal enough, peaceful even. But at night, everything about it felt different. My job was simple. I had to stay at the front desk, answer occasional phone calls, and keep an eye on the security cameras. Sometimes, I'd be asked to walk through the halls just to make sure everything was in order. The owner told me most nights were completely quiet, and he wasn't wrong, at least at first. It was my third night when things started to feel off. Around 2 a.m., the building felt heavier somehow, like the air itself had changed. I remember glancing at the security monitors and noticing something strange. One of the hallway cameras had gone completely black. I figured it was just a camera glitch at first. The place was old, and the wiring didn't exactly look reliable. Still, something about that black screen made me uneasy. It was the camera that showed the hallway leading to the preparation room, the one place I'd been told I wouldn't need to go unless absolutely necessary. I tried to ignore it. I leaned back in my chair, scrolling on my phone, telling myself it wasn't a big deal. But then I heard something. A soft sound, like a faint dragging noise coming from somewhere deeper in the building. I froze. At first, I thought it might have been pipes or maybe the old wooden floors settling. That's what I told myself anyway. But then it came again. Slow, uneven, like something heavy being pulled across the ground. I stood up without even realizing it, my eyes locked on the dark hallway ahead of me. The lights were still on, but they suddenly felt dimmer than before. The silence between those sounds was the worst part, like whatever it was I was listening to. Trying to shake it off, I walked over to check the front door. It was still locked, just like it should be. No signs of anyone breaking in. I even checked the back entrance on the monitor. Nothing. But when I sat back down, something else caught my attention. The camera that had gone black flickered back on. Only now the angle looked slightly different. Not by much, but enough that I noticed. The view seemed shifted, like the camera had been touched. I stared at the screen, my stomach tightening. That's when I noticed something else. The door at the end of that hallway, the one leading into the preparation room, was slightly open. I was sure it had been closed before. I tried to remember if I had checked it earlier, but I couldn't. And the more I thought about it, the more this strange feeling crept in, like I wasn't alone anymore. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe one of the staff had forgotten to shut it properly before leaving. But even as I sat there, trying to convince myself, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was inside that building was quietly moving, just out of sight, waiting for me to notice it. I kept staring at that monitor longer than I should have. The door at the end of the hallway wasn't just slightly open anymore. It looked wider than before. I was sure of it this time. I hadn't taken my eyes off the screen, yet somehow it had moved. That's when I heard it again. That dragging sound, only louder now. It wasn't distant anymore. It was inside the hallway. My chest tightened, and I felt my hands start to shake. I slowly turned my head toward the real hallway, half expecting to see something standing there. But it was empty, completely still. When I looked back at the monitor, I felt my stomach drop. The hallway camera was still on, but something was different. There were marks on the floor. Dark streaks, like something what had been dragged across the tiles, leading straight from the preparation room door and stopping halfway down the hall. I leaned closer to the screen, trying to make sense of it, when suddenly, the image glitched. For a split second, I saw something standing at the end of the hallway. Tall, unnaturally still. Then the screen went back to normal. I stumbled back in my chair, my heart pounding so loud it felt like it filled the entire room. I kept telling myself it was just my imagination, that maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew what I saw. And then came the whisper. Soft. Right behind me. I froze instantly. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. It sounded like someone trying to speak through dry lips, broken, uneven words that I couldn't fully understand. But I knew one thing for sure. It wasn't coming from the cameras. It was in the room with me. I slowly stood up, every movement feeling heavy and wrong. My eyes darted toward the hallway again, still empty. But the whisper came again. Closer this time, right next to my ear. "Don't leave." I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. No one was there. The room was empty, but the air felt colder, thicker. That's when something slammed down the hallway. A loud, violent bang that echoed through the entire building. I jumped, my heart racing out of control, and instinctively looked back at the monitor. The preparation room door was now fully open. Wide. And those dark streaks on the floor, they had gotten longer. Slowly creeping closer to the front desk. I didn't want to believe what I was thinking, but there was no other explanation. Whatever was inside that room wasn't staying there anymore. And then, before I could even react, the hallway lights flickered. The moment the hallway lights went out, something in me snapped. I grabbed my keys from the desk, not even thinking, just knowing I had to get out. But as I turned toward the front door, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, uneven, dragging against the floor. Coming from the hallway. I didn't want to look. Every instinct told me not to, but I did anyway. At first, there was only darkness. Then as my eyes adjusted, I saw it. A shape, standing at the far end of the hall. It was tall but wrong somehow. Its posture looked stiff, like its joints didn't bend the way they should. One arm hangs lower than the other, almost scraping the floor. And its head, it was tilted too far to the side, like something had snapped inside its neck. It didn't move at first. It just stood there, watching me. My breath got caught in my throat, and I felt completely frozen. Then slowly, it took a step forward. I heard that same dragging sound as its foot scraped across the tile. Then another step, and another. That's when I finally forced myself to move. I rushed to the front door, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the keys. I kept glancing over my shoulder, and every time I did, it was closer. Too close. The footsteps were louder now, faster, no longer slow or hesitant. Whatever it was, it had started coming for me. I jammed the key into the lock, missing twice before finally getting it in. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. Except that dragging sound. Right behind me. I turned just as the door unlocked. It was only a few feet away now. I couldn't see its face clearly, but I didn't need to. Something about it felt horribly wrong, like I was looking at something that shouldn't exist, something that was never meant to move. I yanked the door open and stumbled outside, nearly falling onto the concrete. Cold air hit my face, and I didn't stop. I just ran. Behind me, I heard the door slam shut on its own. Not slowly, not gently, violently, like something inside had tried to follow me, but couldn't cross whatever line I had just passed. I didn't look back again. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock it, and once I got inside, I locked the doors immediately and just sat there trying to breathe. For a few seconds, I couldn't even start the engine. I kept staring at the funeral home, expecting something to come out after me. But nothing did. The building just stood there, silent, still, like nothing had happened at all. I drove home that night without looking back. I didn't even call my boss until the next morning, and when I did, I told him I quit. I didn't explain everything. I just said the job wasn't for me. He didn't seem surprised. In fact, there was this pause before he spoke, like he already knew. A week later, I heard the funeral home had temporarily shut down. No official reason was given. I tried to convince myself it was all stress, or my imagination getting the best of me. But sometimes late at night, I still think about that hallway, and the way those footsteps sounded as they got closer. And the part that bothers me the most is this. Whatever was inside that building never tried to leave. It just wanted me to stay. I was 26 when I started working as an overnight assistant at a funeral home in a quiet suburban area. It wasn't something I had ever planned on doing, but after losing my previous job, I needed something stable, even if it made me uncomfortable. The place had been around for decades, owned by the same family, and had a reputation for being professional, but also a little strange. My shift started at 10 p.m. and ended at 6 in the morning. Most of my responsibilities were simple: filing paperwork, answering occasional calls, and sometimes helping prepare viewing rooms for the next day. The embalming room, though, was off limits unless the director was present. He made that very clear on my first day. The building itself had this constant, faint smell of chemicals mixed with something older, something harder to describe. At night, it felt even stronger. On my fourth shift, just past midnight, I was organizing files behind the front desk when I heard something unusual. A soft metallic clink, like one of the drawers in the preparation room had just been opened. At first, I thought I had imagined it. The building was old, and sometimes the pipes or metal fixtures would make random noises, especially at night. That's what I told myself as I stood there listening. Then it happened again. A sharper sound this time. Clear. Controlled. Like a drawer being pulled open slowly. I froze, my eyes drifting toward the hallway that led to the preparation room. The lights were still on, casting that dull yellow glow across the floor, but something about it felt different now. Too quiet, like the entire building was holding its breath. I stepped out from behind the desk, trying to stay calm. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding weaker than I expected. No response. I swallowed hard and walked a few steps closer to the hallway, each movement feeling heavier than the last. I knew I wasn't supposed to go back there, especially not alone, but I also knew no one else should have been inside the building. As I got closer, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. The door to the preparation room was slightly open. I was sure it had been closed earlier, and then just as I was about to turn back, I heard something else. A soft scraping sound, coming from inside that room. Not metal this time. Something slower, like fingernails dragging gently across a surface. I stood there for a few seconds, completely still, trying to convince myself there was a logical explanation. Maybe something had fallen. Maybe a loose tool shifted on its own. But that sound, it didn't feel accidental. It was too slow, too deliberate. I took another step closer to the door, my heart starting to pound harder with each second. The gap between the door and the frame seemed darker than it should have been, like the light inside the room wasn't reaching it properly. "Hello?" I called again, a little louder this time. Silence. Then scrape. Right after I spoke, I felt a cold wave run through my body. It was like whatever was inside had been waiting, listening. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. I reached out slowly and pushed the door open just enough to see inside. The preparation room looked normal at first. The overhead light was on, the metal table in the center was empty, and everything seemed to be in place. But then I noticed one of the drawers. It was open, just a few inches, and it was moving. Not wide open, not closing, just slightly shifting back and forth, like something inside was pushing against it. I stepped back immediately, my breath catching in my throat. That's when I heard it. A faint whisper. Not clear words, just broken, breathy sounds coming from inside the room. My eyes locked onto the open drawer. And slowly, painfully slow, it slid open just a little more. Whatever was inside was trying to get out. I couldn't move. Every part of me was screaming to run, but my legs felt locked in place. I just stood there, staring at that drawer as it crept open another inch, then another. The whispering got louder. Still not clear words, but closer now, like it was right on the other side of the room, trying to force something out. I felt my chest tighten, my breathing turning shallow and uneven. Then suddenly, the drawer stopped. For a split second, everything went completely silent. And that silence was worse than the noise, because it felt like something had just noticed me. Before I could react, the drawer slammed shut, making me jump back. At the same time, the overhead light flickered once, then steadied again. I didn't wait. I turned and ran down the hallway, back toward the front desk, my footsteps loud and uneven. I grabbed my phone, my keys, anything, and rushed to the front door. But as soon as I reached it, I stopped. The lock was already open. I was sure I had locked it earlier. My hands shook as I pulled the door open, the cold night air hitting me instantly. I stepped outside, not even caring about anything I left behind. But just as I crossed the doorway, I heard it, right behind me, clear this time. A voice. Soft, broken, but unmistakable. "Don't close it." I froze for a second, my heart racing uncontrollably. Every instinct told me not to turn around. So I didn't. I stepped out, pulled the door shut behind me, and ran to my car without looking back. I don't know what was inside that drawer, and I don't want to. But sometimes, when I think about that voice, I realize something that still makes my stomach turn. It wasn't asking me to stay. It was asking me to leave the door open. I sat in my car for a long time that night, longer than I probably should have. My hands were still shaking, and I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone, or something, standing behind me in the dark parking lot. But there was nothing. Just that building. Quiet. Still. Like it had always been. I eventually drove home, but I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that drawer slowly opening, and whatever might have been inside it, waiting for someone to let it out. The next morning, I called in and told them I wasn't coming back. I didn't go into details. I just said it wasn't the right job for me. The director didn't argue. He just paused for a second, then said, "I understand," in a way that didn't sound surprised at all. A few days later, I passed by the funeral home during the day. Everything looked normal again. Cars in the lot. Lights on. People going in and out like nothing had ever happened. But I couldn't shake one thought. That drawer didn't open on its own. Something inside it was trying to get out. And if I had listened and left that door open, I don't think it would have stayed there. I was 29 when I started working as a night attendant at a funeral home located just outside a small industrial town. It wasn't my dream job by any means, but I had recently moved there after a breakup and needed something fast to get back on my feet. The place was old, but well maintained on the surface, with polished floors, quiet hallways, and that constant smell of disinfectant that never really went away. My shift started at 9 p.m. and ended at 5 in the morning. Most nights were supposed to be empty, just me, a security monitor, and the occasional call from the on-call director. I was told I'd rarely have to go into the back areas unless something urgent came up. The building always felt different at night, though. Not scary at first, just too quiet, like even the air wasn't moving properly. In my second week, I was sitting at the front desk going through routine paperwork when I noticed something strange on the security monitor. One of the hallway cameras showed a figure standing completely still, right at the end of the corridor. I leaned closer to the monitor, thinking it was just a glitch or maybe a reflection. The hallway camera had a slight blur sometimes, especially when the lights flickered. But this didn't look like a glitch. The figure was still there, standing at the very end of the corridor, completely motionless. I zoomed in on the feed, my stomach tightening a little. The hallway lights were on, bright enough that I should have been able to see details clearly. But the image felt slightly distorted around that spot, like the camera didn't want to focus on it properly. I checked the other cameras. Empty rooms. Normal hallways. Everything else looked fine. When I looked back at that specific feed, the figure was gone. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, and told myself it was just fatigue. Long shifts can mess with your mind. That's what I kept repeating. But then I heard it. A soft tap. From the hallway. I turned my head slowly toward the corridor outside the desk. Nothing was there. The lights were steady. No movement. A few seconds passed. Tap. Again. Closer this time. I stood up, slowly walking toward the hallway entrance. My footsteps felt too loud against the silence. I peeked around the corner. Empty. But then I noticed something that made my skin tighten. On the polished floor, there was a single wet footprint. Fresh. It wasn't mine. I stepped back immediately, my mind trying to rationalize it. Maybe someone from the day shift had come back in and forgotten to clean it. Maybe a pipe had leaked. But deep down, I knew none of it made sense. Because the footprint was facing toward me. Like whatever made it had already turned around and was now somewhere in the building with me. I backed away from the hallway slowly, my eyes fixed on that footprint like it might move on its own. My mind kept trying to explain it, maintenance, a cleaning mistake, anything, but nothing fit. The air around me felt colder now, like the building had subtly changed temperature without warning. I returned to the front desk, but I didn't sit down. I just stood there listening. That's when I heard it again. A tap, then another. Not from the hallway this time. From behind me. I spun around quickly, but there was nothing there. Just the rows of closed doors leading deeper into the building. The preparation rooms. The storage areas. Places I was never supposed to enter alone. I checked the monitors again. Every camera looked normal, except the hallway one. Now it was showing something different. The camera was pointed slightly lower than before. Like someone had adjusted it, and in the frame, more footprints appeared. One after another, slowly forming a path down the hallway. My breathing gets shallow. I grab my phone, thinking I should call the director, but there was no signal. That had never happened before inside the building. Then I heard something that made my hand freeze mid-dial. A whisper. Not through the phone. In the room. Very faint, but close enough that I could tell it wasn't coming from the hallway anymore. It was behind the front desk. I didn't turn around right away. I just stared forward, trying to stay still, pretending I hadn't heard it. But then it came again. Clearer this time. Not words exactly, just a broken breath and something that sounded like my name being attempted. I slowly turned. Nothing. But when I looked down at the floor behind the desk, there was a wet mark there too. Right behind where I had been standing. Fresh. As if something had been standing directly behind me for a while. watching, waiting. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might pass out. And then every monitor in the building flickered at the same time. Once, twice, and went dark. Complete silence filled the funeral home. And in that silence, I heard footsteps start moving again, this time toward the front desk. The footsteps didn't rush. They didn't need to. They were slow, steady, and getting closer with every second. Each one echoed through the darkened building like it had nowhere else to go but straight to me. I backed away from the desk, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip my phone. The emergency lights had kicked in after the blackout, casting everything in a dull red glow that made the hallway look even locked. It wasn't supposed to lock from the outside like that. I pulled harder, panic rising in my throat. Then I heard it behind me. Not footsteps this time. Breathing. Close. I froze completely. The air felt different now, heavier, like something was standing just a few feet away, filling the space without making a sound. Slowly, I turned. At first, I didn't see anything. Just the empty desk area. The monitors are still black. The hallway behind it stretched into darkness. Then I saw it. Not fully at first. Just a shape near the hallway entrance. Tall. Still. Too still. It stepped forward into the red emergency light. And I wish I could say it looked like a person. But it didn't move right. Its shoulders were uneven, its head slightly tilted too far, like it had been held in that position for too long. One arm hung lower than the other, swaying slightly even though it wasn't walking anymore. It wasn't running. It was just coming closer. Slowly. Confidently. I stumbled backward, finally breaking into a run toward the side exit door. My fingers fumbled with the handle, slipping twice before I got it open. Behind me, I heard something louder. A dragging step. Closer. I threw myself outside into the cold air, almost falling down the steps. I didn't stop. I ran straight to the parking lot, my lungs burning, until I reached my car. I didn't look back until I was inside. But even through the rearview mirror, I saw the front door of the funeral home slowly swing shut on its own. Like it was never chasing me out, only letting me go. I drove for what felt like hours before I finally pulled over somewhere lit and crowded. My hands were still locked around the steering wheel, like letting go would somehow bring me back there. I kept replaying everything in my head, the footprints, the whispers, that thing standing in the red light. When I finally got home, I didn't even go inside right away. I just sat in the car, staring at my house like it was unfamiliar. The next morning, I called the funeral home. No answer. Not even voicemail. I tried again later that day, and the line was completely disconnected. A few days after that, I drove past the place during daylight. It looked normal. Too normal. Lights on, doors closed, no signs of anything wrong. Like it hadn't swallowed my entire night, just a few days earlier. I asked around later, casually, trying not to sound insane. No one seemed surprised it was quiet, but one detail stuck with me. A former employee told me something strange before walking away. He said, "It's worse when it learns your name." I never told him mine. At least, I don't think I did. But sometimes late at night, I still hear footsteps outside my door, and they always stop right before the knock. I was 31 when I took a temporary overnight job at a funeral home that had recently reopened after renovations. It was supposed to be modernized, according to the manager, with upgraded security systems and new equipment. I didn't plan to stay long. It was just a way to pay bills while I looked for something better. The place sat at the edge of a quiet residential area, surrounded by low walls and neatly trimmed hedges. During the day, it actually looked clean and professional, almost too perfect. But at night, it felt different, like the building didn't fully belong to the present anymore. My shift started at 11 p.m. I was alone most nights, except for the occasional call from the night supervisor or a late-arriving body transfer. My main job was simple: monitor cameras, check locked doors, and make sure the preparation room stayed secure. In my first week, everything seemed normal enough. But on the fifth night, around 1:30 a.m., I noticed something strange on the new digital security system. One of the cameras wasn't showing an empty room like it should have been. It was showing someone standing inside it. I leaned forward immediately, thinking there had to be some kind of explanation. The system was brand new, so I told myself it was probably a calibration issue or a recording loop glitch. But the image didn't look like a loop. It looked live. The camera was pointed into one of the preparation rooms. Bright LED lighting. Stainless steel table. Everything exactly how it should be. except for the figure standing near the corner. It wasn't moving, just standing there, facing away from the camera. I switched to another feed, then back again. Same image. No change. No timestamp error. No playback indicator. My chest started tightening as I grabbed the radio. "Hello? Is anyone in the prep room right now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Only static came back. I waited a few seconds, then repeated it. Still nothing. I stood up from the desk and walked toward the hallway, the radio still in my hand. The building was quieter than usual. Even the ventilation sound seemed lower, like it had been turned down without warning. As I got closer to the preparation room, I noticed something that made me slow down. The door was slightly open. I stopped immediately. I was almost certain I had locked it earlier during my rounds. From inside the room, I heard a faint metallic sound, like something being gently tapped against steel. Once, then again. I pushed the door open just a few inches. The room was empty. Completely empty. Nobody. No staff. Nothing. But the camera still showed someone inside it. And then I heard a whisper behind me. Right outside the room. Soft and very close. "Check again." I froze in the doorway, my hand still on the edge of the door. For a second, I honestly thought my brain had just misfired from exhaustion. Night shifts do that to you. They mess with your sense of time, your hearing, everything. But that whisper didn't feel like imagination. It felt intentional. Slowly, I turned my head toward the hallway behind me. Nothing. Just the dim lights stretching down toward the front desk. I stepped back into the room, forcing myself to look around properly this time. Stainless steel table. Cabinets closed. Equipment neatly arranged. Everything looked exactly like it should. Except for one thing. There were wet footprints on the floor. Fresh ones, leading from the corner of the room, toward the door I was standing in. My throat tightened. I hadn't made those. I backed out of the room immediately, my breathing getting faster. The radio in my hand suddenly crackled again, but this time it wasn't static. It was faint breathing, like someone was holding the other end without speaking. "Hello," I said again, my voice sharper now. "Is someone there?" The breathing stopped. Silence returned, but only for a moment. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, unhurried, coming toward me. I turned off the preparation room light and stepped into the hallway, trying to see where the sound was coming from. The corridor was long, straight, and empty, but the footsteps kept echoing anyway. Closer, closer. Then they stopped, right outside my line of sight. I didn't move. I couldn't. From behind one of the hallway pillars, for a few seconds, nothing happened. I saw something shift. A shadow, too tall to be a staff member, too still to be a normal person. It leaned slightly into view. And that's when I realized something that made my stomach drop completely. It wasn't walking toward me anymore. It was already standing where I was supposed to go back, blocking the only exit to the front desk. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. I don't even know if I can call it a thing at that point, because it didn't behave like anything I understood. It just stood there at the end of the hallway, slightly turned toward me, like it already knew exactly where I was without needing to look directly. The emergency lights above us flickered once. Then again, and in that brief stutter of light, it stepped forward. Not fast, not rushing, just one slow step. Then another. I backed up instinctively, my heel hitting the edge of the doorway behind me. The preparation room. I hadn't even realized I was moving backward until I was almost inside it again. My radio was still in my hand. I pressed it hard, trying to get anything. "Security. I need help. Something is in the hallway," I said, voice breaking. Only breathing came back. But now it was louder. Right behind the static. The figure kept coming closer, and I finally got a clear look at it under the flickering light. It wasn't fully solid. Parts of it seemed wrong. Like the edges of its body didn't hold shape properly. Almost like the air around it couldn't decide what it was supposed to be. Its head tilted slightly as it moved, tracking me. I grabbed the door handle behind me and pulled hard. It slammed shut. Too loud. Too final. And immediately the footsteps stopped. Silence. I stood there in the preparation room, breathing heavily, waiting for something to happen. Seconds passed. Nothing moved. Then, tap. From inside the room. Right beside the metal table. I turned slowly. The room was empty, except the camera on the wall. It was facing me now. Even though I never touched it, I didn't wait to understand what I was seeing. I backed away from the camera, then slowly moved toward the door, expecting it to be locked, stuck, anything that would trap me inside. But it wasn't. It opened easily. Too easily. I stepped into the hallway again, and it was empty. No figure. No footsteps. Just the same flickering lights and long, silent corridor like nothing had ever happened. I went straight to the front desk, grabbed my things, and left the building without looking back. The next morning, I called in to quit. The manager didn't ask questions. He just paused for a long time before saying, "You weren't supposed to see that camera feed." When I asked what he meant, the line went dead. I tried calling again later that day, but the number had been disconnected. A week later, I drove past the funeral home during daylight. The building was open again. Staff moving inside. Cars in the lot. Normal. Like I never stood in that hallway. But I noticed something on the new security system through the window. One of the cameras was pointed directly at the preparation room. And even from outside, I could see something standing in the corner of the feed. Still. Waiting. Like it never left.